Hi guys. So I'm back and I'm back after a break. But I'm back with one of the most thought-provoking books that I have read this year. It's called The Vegetarian by Kang. I don't know whether you can see the cover properly. Um, so this book was given to me by a friend, and when I got it, I thought I'll just finish it in one go because obviously it's a small book, and also it's a Korean story. So I'm a person who loves these Korean, Japanese, Chinese kind of stories. Um, but that was not the case. I could not read it like that. I had to take breaks while reading it. So I actually had to take it in small doses. Uh, so the thing is, when I was reading this and when I finished reading it, I had mixed feelings about it. But then later, so I didn't even know whether I liked it or not. Uh, but then later, the more I think about it, I think the more I like it as well, right? But it is a story that is difficult for me even to rate. So if you have read it, you can tell me what your thoughts are about this. If you can rate this, just give me a rating. But anyway, I'll just tell you about the story and my thoughts about it. So this book has a story about a young woman who decides to stop eating meat overnight because of a dream that she has had. Um, the thing is, we don't necessarily see, I mean, she's obviously the protagonist of the story, but we don't necessarily see her perspective in the story because the story is narrated by her husband and her brother-in-law and her sister. So there are three chapters. The first one is told by her husband. But in the first one, we can see or we can read snippets of her dreams, her bloody dreams. But except for those, we don't necessarily see her perspective. So the first chapter is narrated by her husband, as I told you. The second is narrated by her brother-in-law. And the final chapter is narrated by her sister. So this protagonist is called Young-hae, and when you read the first chapter, you understand that she gets these violent, gruesome dreams. And as she states, whenever somebody asks the reason as to why she decided to stop eating meat, she would say, it's because of a dream that I have had. But it is interesting to see how becoming a vegetarian is such a bizarre thing in that society. So her decision to become a vegetarian baffles everyone, her husband and her family. So her husband is almost annoyed and her family is disappointed. The thing is, so when she says that, I don't want to eat meat because I've had these dreams, nobody asks her what the dreams were, and nobody tries to understand why she was seeing them. Instead, they would just force her to eat meat. Okay, so they would just say that we can't understand why you're not eating meat, but you better start eating meat right now. So at one point, her father, her arrogant, aggressive father, tries to force feed her a piece of meat. And at that point, she tries to slit her wrist. Obviously, she tries to commit suicide. And then they admit her to the hospital. So, you can also see the indifference of her husband. Of course, he's annoyed, but the way he tells the story, it's more about him than about her. Like, he doesn't want to understand. He doesn't want to comfort her. Right. So after having one of these dreams, she would, throw away all the meat in the house and she would come back to bed and she would coil herself in the bed. But the husband would just sleep next to her, without consoling her, without, touching her, caressing her. So, yeah. So he's simply baffled by this decision, but he doesn't show any concern or he doesn't show any need to understand Young-hae. Okay, so Young-hae or Young-hae, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, is the protagonist. So towards the end of the first chapter, we learn that, she is admitted to the hospital and she spends some time in the hospital for mentally ill patients. So that is what we learn in the first chapter. And the first chapter gives you this quite eerie feeling, right? So when I was reading the first chapter, I actually felt tired because it feels like it's a lot to take. And also in the first chapter, the emptiness of the marriage is quite tangibly felt. So you feel how they lack a genuine connection. So probably that marriage is a marriage of convenience. The husband says that he married her because she was like the most ordinary woman that he has ever met, and that would kind of compensate for his mediocrity. So anyways, so that emptiness is quite tangible in the first chapter, and that kind of mingles with the eeriness of her dreams and her silence. Okay, so once she stops eating meat, once she starts getting these dreams, she kind of withdraws from others, withdraws from having connection with others. She wears this expressionless, what could you say? She looks so expressionless. She is kind of devoid of expression. So anyways, towards the end of the first chapter, you see her outside the mental hospital, naked in her upper body, holding a dead bird. Okay. So the second chapter is narrated by her brother-in-law, the husband of her sister, In Hai. I think I'm pronouncing these names correctly. So if the first chapter is eerie, the second chapter is quite intense, because in the second chapter, we learn about her brother-in-law's intense desire to be intimate with her, after learning about a particular physical detail about her from his wife. So that's quite unsettling to read, but he becomes quite obsessed with Young-hae, and he somehow manages to manipulate and use her vulnerability to fulfill his artistic and sexual desires, I would say. So he's a studio artist. So after learning about this particular physical detail about Young-hae, he starts fantasizing about creating this piece of art, which would probably, I don't know, not be approved by the society. But somehow he uses his powers of persuasion, and he kind of, convinces Young-hae to appear as a model in this particular piece of art. So now when we read the second chapter, just like in the first chapter, you can really feel the emptiness of the marriage between In-hae, okay, Young-hae's sister, and her husband, who is the brother-in-law, who persuades Young-hae to appear in this particular, video film. So just like in the first one, the emptiness of their marriage is tangible. I think the writer has done a marvelous job in creating that particular, empty feeling. Okay, so as I told you earlier, it's tangible. The reader feels it. I felt it, and it also shows how their marriage is also maybe a marriage of convenience. Okay, they have not got married just because they're soulmates or something like that. Okay, I think he's not even sure as to why he got married to Young-hae's sister, who is In-hae. And this brother-in-law is also quite a self-centered man who is just obsessed with his, work. But he's not a very successful artist as well. So he is somebody who does not necessarily, contribute to the work of his family. He doesn't look after his son properly. He kind of ignores all the responsibilities. He's such an irresponsible father and a husband, and also it looks like he's an emotionally unavailable husband, just like Young-hae's husband, I would say. So probably I think the writer wants to bring out the theme of marriage of convenience, and how these marriages do not become successful if they are devoid of love. Okay, how the foundation of a marriage should be love and connection, and how when they are absent a marriage could just fail, and how the partners could feel miserable. um, so towards the end of the second chapter, Young-hae's sister In-hae learns about what her husband has done to her sister. And then what she does is she kind of calls the emergencies and asks them to take her husband to to jail, and take her sister to a mental hospital. So when the third chapter begins, which is narrated by In-hae, Young-hae's sister, we learn that Young-hae has been admitted to kind of a care center for mentally ill patients. So somehow it's heartwarming to see how In-hae, her sister, despite all this, does not give up on Young-hae. And I think in the third chapter, the reader also learns how Young-hae has been subjected to violence, okay, and abused by her father when she was young. So her father is a violent, aggressive, arrogant man, which shows the power of patriarchy, I would say. So In-hae, the sister, says that, they had kind of a very abusive childhood. And what In-hae says that her coping mechanism was to become the caretaker of her family, and she would kind of take over the role of her mother, okay, by maybe cooking and providing and taking care of the father and everyone else in the family. So she feels guilty because she realizes that it was Young-hae who became the subject to the violence and the harassment of their father. And Young-hae had to endure that, just without uttering a word against it. And In-hae says that, she feels guilty because she just wanted to survive, cope with it by taking care of everyone, by becoming the caretaker. And she understands now that she could not stand up for Young-hae. And also in this chapter we learn how everyone else in the family has abandoned Young-hae. Okay, so they did not want anything to do with her, because for them, rather than she's not just a mentally ill person, but she's also a person who broke the social norms. So something I understood when I read this story was that, when a woman breaks the rules, maybe for psychological reasons, the whole society goes against her, right? So nobody asks her the reasons, the true reasons, okay? Nobody asks her what she felt, okay? And when she, nobody asks Young-hae how she felt when she saw those dreams. So nobody questions or nobody's concerned about her well-being, but everyone becomes mad because she broke the societal norms, right? So I understood that when a woman breaks rules, everybody goes against her rather than being supportive. So I felt like if somebody asks her at one point, okay, why what kind of dreams do you have? Can I help you? Okay, we do understand. If somebody tells her, we do understand. Okay, it's all right. If you don't want to eat meat, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. So if somebody shows her some empathy, okay, then she would not have become probably she would not have gone down that lane, and she would not have ended up in a mental health hospital, right, or mental hospital. So yeah, so that's really sad because nobody's actually concerned about her well-being, but they're just disappointed because she broke the social norms. So in the third chapter, we also learn that In-hae also has these kind of violent dreams. Okay, so she tells that I think she kind of describes her dreams, but I think the writer contrasts the two sisters by kind of juxtaposing them to show how one would just succumb to darkness, right? And how the other would choose light and keep going, right? So I think there are two kinds of people in this world, and some just choose to be in the dark, and some get addicted to that feeling and they decide that they would not want to come out of it. But there are others who would fight against it and who would understand that they need to keep going, right? Not just for themselves, they have to do it maybe for their loved ones as well. So towards the end, In-hai tells Young-hai, I also have these dreams, but they're just dreams, okay? We just have to go on. So I think she wants to say that these dreams do not define us, okay? We are something beyond them. But I think by that time, Young-hai has already, become so frail, and then she, comes to the verge of her death. So, it's actually as I told you earlier, when I was reading the book, I had mixed feelings, and once I finished reading it, I didn't even know whether I liked it or not. But I think this book is so thought-provoking. You start thinking about, it has such a great impact, such a deep impact on the reader. So after reading it, once I finished it also, I was continuously thinking about it. And I think it has triggered something in me also. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized what the writer actually wanted to bring out, So it is that kind of a book. But the downside for me would be not giving closure to the reader, okay? I don't know whether I'm wrong to expect closure, but I am a reader who likes closure, right? I think the reader has to rely too much on assumption when reading this book. So now when I was reading it, when I learned about her bloody dreams and her decision to eat meat and all that, I wanted to know why, like exactly what was the reason behind this, okay? And at one point, In-hai, her sister, sees a dream, and she experiences that in real life with Young-hai. So what she sees in the dream is done by Young-hai in real life. So I wanted an explanation for such things, like how, why, right? So initially I thought there was some kind of supernatural thing, going on. So for me, so towards the end, the doctor does not necessarily give a proper diagnosis. So the doctor at one point says that she's an anorexic patient, and she also suffers from schizophrenia, but there's no kind of confirmation about that. So I think as a reader who likes to have closure, okay, that was kind of disappointing for me. I would like to know like exactly why. Don't think that I'm unimaginative. I know that we have to imagine to a certain extent, but that was kind of a bit disappointing to me. But it doesn't mean that reading this book was a waste, because to date I've been thinking about it, So don't feel disappointed, or don't feel discouraged and decide not to read the book. If you come across this book, please read it. It's worth reading. Right, so that's all for today, and I hope you enjoyed this video. So if you like it, please give it a thumbs up, and for more videos, please subscribe. See you soon.